Hello everyone, welcome to our video. If you've been wondering what is the best radio replacement available for the factory radio in my Dodge Ram, maybe you're tired of that small screen in your dash, maybe it's defective and the dealership wants an arm and a leg to replace it for you. Well, in this video, we're going to be going over 3 different options available to you from Linkswell. We at Linkswell have 3 different options available to you. On the left side, we have the Generation 5S. In the middle, we have the Generation 6. And to the right, we have the XL. Both Gen 5S and 6 measure 12.1 inches. And the XL comes at 15.6 inches. Right off the bat, you can tell that the Generation 5S uses a different operating system than the 6 and the XL. All 3 units are currently sitting in their home screen. We're going to be talking about the difference in features and functions that are found in each one of these 3 different options for you. We're also going to be doing an unboxing for you so that you could get familiar with the harnesses that are included in each one of the packages. And most importantly, what are they used for? And last but not least, in the background, we have a 2020 Dodge Ram 3500 diesel that we're going to be performing an installation on. Let's start with the Generation 5S. One of the very unique things about the Generation 5S is that it has the Sirius XM ready capability. What that means is you could go out and add a GPS-based satellite radio receiver. The SXM is already built in as part of the audio sources that this radio comes with. Now keep in mind that none of the settings on any of these units have been set. As you can tell, the time and date is incorrect, and neither have any of the CarPlay, Android Auto, or Bluetooth connections have been established. Now let's go over one of the unique features and functions that the Generation 5S has. If you are a Sirius XM subscriber, you have 2 different ways to be able to get satellite radio through the Generation 5S. One of them is you can go out and add a GPS-based satellite radio receiver. The model number to that satellite radio receiver is the XSV300. The other option is you can use the application that's part of your CarPlay or Android Auto. Now the main difference between the 2 different options is one of them depends on cellular network connections and the other one is connected to a satellite. If you're using the GPS-based satellite radio receiver, the Sirius XM application is already one of your audio sources. If you're using the application that's part of your Android Auto or CarPlay functionality, then you would have to go to apps, you would have to launch Z-Link, which is your Android Auto and Apple CarPlay connection. Now let's talk about some basic controls that the Generation 5S has. As you can tell, this entire screen is going to take up the area where your factory radio was and where your climate controls were. Now, you can control your AC one of 2 different ways. One is this bottom row of icons can move left and right for as long as you want. Now, in one of these sections, you're going to find a very quick AC climate control section. You have fan up and down, you have AC on and off, you have temperature up and down, a power button, recirculation, and your front defrost. The other way you can access your AC climate controls is you can look for the icon that's labeled climate, which would be right over here. You push it and it's going to give you a more detailed AC climate control board. Now, if you pay attention inside of the climate controls, one thing you don't see is your heated seats or heated steering wheel. If your vehicle happens to be equipped with any one of those features or functions, the unit does not know right out of the box that the vehicle is in fact equipped with them. What you have to do is you got to find the settings button or icon. And inside of your settings, you're going to want to go to System. At the very top, there's Setting Guide. And over here, the second option says Seat, Steering Wheel. You touch that, and here is where you would enable those functions. Once you have enabled those functions, always make sure that you hit OK and that you save and reboot to save those functions. Once the unit reboots and you go to your climate page, you will now see your heated seats as well as cooled seats, and you will also find the heated steering wheel option. Keep in mind that if your car does not come factory equipped with any of the heated, cooled seats or heated steering wheel, enabling these things isn't going to magically make your vehicle have them. They have to be factory equipped and enabled so that your new Linkswell Generation 5S radio can have control over them. You also have access to an advanced audio settings. If you press the EQ, it's going to open up a 16-band EQ. You can use any one of the stored presets. You can change the way it's set, and you can also save that particular setting by swiping over to the left and saving it on any one of the 3 presets. The next option is going to give you access to your mid and high crossover filters. The next option is going to give you independent volume control for your front and rear outputs. The next one is going to give you access to the crossover filter for your subwoofer. And here you can change the volume output of your subwoofer. Now the last one, this is for time delay settings. You can measure the distance between your driver's side speaker and the driver, as well as the front left, and rear right speakers to give it a better sound effect. Another basic feature that the Generation 5S has is the option to install up to 3 different cameras. This unit has 3 video inputs for a side, a front, and a rear view camera. When you put the vehicle in reverse, the rear view camera is going to always dominate. To access your side or front view cameras, you have to press the cam button. Other audio features that you can access using the icons at the bottom happen to be starting with radio. This is where you would have access to AM and FM. The music icon is going to access the USB input, whatever it is that you have plugged into there, in the form of either a hard drive or a thumb drive, whether you've got music videos or you have songs or just music in there, you would select the music button. Phone link gives you quick shortcut to CarPlay and Android Auto, whichever one you're using. The climate button, we already went through that one. The next one is your video button. This is going to access the auxiliary audio video input that this unit has on the back. Bluetooth is if you prefer the old school method and you don't want to use CarPlay or Android Auto, but you want to just use Bluetooth the way we used to prior to Android Auto and CarPlay coming into the world, that would be your icon. Now the navigation button is a little unique because the navigation button can do different things. You can change the behavior of the navigation button. You can have it access what we at Linkswell call iGo navigation. iGo navigation happens to be a third-party GPS-based navigation application that is sold separately. It's a license that you have to buy, and you could see it in here. It's in the apps. The app is already loaded, but when you push it and the unit doesn't have the license to activate that function, then it'll tell you that the license is missing. This is purchased separately through your dealer, and it'll unlock a GPS-based navigation. So if you're not using Android Auto or CarPlay, you can use a GPS-based navigation option, which is iGo. And so the navigation button can be set. For example, if I go in here and I look for my settings function, hit settings, under user, you can change the behavior of the navigation button. You can tell it to open up your Google Maps if you have Wi-Fi connected to it, or you can have it open up the iGo navigation map. That's what's cool about the navigation button. What I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna go over how to connect your iPhone so that you can use Apple CarPlay. Before you go into Bluetooth settings to pair them together, you wanna make sure you go into your apps, to the icon labeled apps. You wanna open up Z-Link, and inside of Z-Link, you're gonna see an option that says settings. Make sure that auto reconnect is on and that car life is on. When you turn on car life, it's gonna turn off Android Auto. Once you've done this, press the two squares in the upper right hand corner, swipe all the way down, and hit clear all. Next, you're gonna look for your Bluetooth icon. You're gonna open it, turn on the Bluetooth function on your phone. On the left, you'll see a list of buttons. The one before the last has a chain link function on it. If you don't see this searching function, you're gonna wanna press the magnifying glass. But when your phone name comes up on the list, you're gonna wanna touch it, and you're gonna wait for the pairing process to take place. I'm not gonna stop this video so you could see the entire process. Once I've selected my name, I'm gonna touch the chain link so that it can connect. It's gonna ask me for a code, and the code is 4 zeros. I'm gonna select pair. Now there's a check mark on my name, and because when I went to Z-Link, I checked on to make sure that the auto connect function was on, it's gonna automatically launch it, and now it's gonna establish the CarPlay connection. Pay attention to your phone because your phone is gonna ask you if you'd like to use CarPlay. When it does that, say yes. Otherwise, this is gonna continue and just sit there and say connecting because it's waiting for you to give it a response. And now we have CarPlay connected. And so that's how simple it was to connect Apple CarPlay. What I have now is an Android phone, and I'm going to show you the process to connect your Android phone so that you can use Android Auto. It is identical to connecting an Apple CarPlay. So what you want to do is you want to go to apps, and you're going to open up Z-Link exactly the same way you did with the Apple phone. You go to apps, you want to open Z-Link. You're going to want to make sure that inside of the settings, the auto reconnect is on, that Android Auto is on, and when you do that, it's going to automatically turn off the Apple CarPlay functionality. Hit the two squares in the upper right hand corner, swipe down to clear all, and you're going to want to then go to Bluetooth. Once you're in Bluetooth mode, you're going to go to the square, the one before the last one, and it's going to start to search. Go to settings on your Android phone, go to connections, touch Bluetooth, and now you're going to see that your phone name comes up. You're going to go ahead and touch it, and when that happens, you're going to also hit the chain link so that it can establish the communication. It's going to ask you for a code. It is 4 zeros, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to select pair. So once that happens, it says allow access to contacts. Yes, allow. And once it does that, you're going to see that the Z-Link is going to automatically launch because we set it so that it can automatically connect. So all I did was touch the name of the radio on the phone, and Android Auto came up and connected. Android Auto happens to be a little more unique in how it likes to do things because Android platforms are more of an open platform. They allow different things. So these things can happen. It's just a matter of knowing what you're doing so that you could try different things to be able to establish that communication. But now we have Android Auto already connected. The idea is to either know what you're doing or talk to someone that knows what they're doing so they can walk you through it. This is important. Linkswell tech support is awesome when it comes to stuff like this. So this is now the Android Auto connection, and you guys saw previously the Apple CarPlay connection. And so that was a very brief and hopefully very quick rundown of the different functions that the Linkswell Generation 5S has. One last thing that we want to talk about is how to set your climate settings after the installation. Remember, there's 3 different climate control functions that your truck can be equipped with. It could be equipped with the automatic climate controls where you have dual temperature settings. It could be equipped with single temperature controls with 4 fan speeds, or it could be equipped with single temperature settings with 7 fan speeds. And so the way you tell the unit what type of climate controls your truck has is you want to go into settings, and then you're going to want to jump into system. Under setting guide, there is car model AC. In here, you're going to tell the unit you're being installed in a Dodge Ram Low if you have the single temperature setting with 4 speeds, Dodge Ram Mid if it's single temperature setting with 7 speeds. If you have Dodge Ram High, it's because you have the dual temperature settings on your factory climate controls. Once you have selected the right one, it's going to take you to this page. This is where you tell it what year you're installing in. Typically, you're going to want to select 2019. You press OK. It brings you back to the previous page. Here, you're going to want to hit the back arrow 1 time, and you're going to hit save and reboot to make sure that those settings are saved. All right, so here we are. One of my favorite parts about the Linkswell products and installing them is that you really don't have to worry about any additional parts, any third-party company interfaces to retain your factory steering wheel control modules, to retain a factory backup camera. Do I need an adapter to maintain my factory amplified system? We at Linkswell do all of our CAN bus decoding by ourselves and don't require any third-party companies to fit our radios into these vehicles. Now, in this particular vehicle, I also like the fact that you don't need a lot of tools to disassemble the dash. All you really need is a T20 Torx bit and a number 7 socket. The T20 is going to help you remove the 2 screws that are up at the top. Once this whole panel comes out, depending on what radio you have, the screen can either stay attached to the sub dashboard behind this panel, and that's where you're going to need the number 7 socket to remove the screen from the sub dash panel. One good common practice to have is to turn the radio on and double check all of the factory functions. This will help you find out what is or what is not working. In this particular case, this vehicle is so base model that it doesn't even have the track up and down functions or volume up and down on the steering wheel. But one of the things we can double check is make sure that we're in fact getting audio through the speakers. You can throw the vehicle in reverse to find out if your backup camera is working. As you could see in this one, it says camera system unavailable. So I suspect that after installing the Gen 5S in this particular vehicle, what's going to happen is the radio will go into reverse mode, but because the factory backup camera isn't working, I'm going to get a no signal message. This is up to the owner of the vehicle if later on they'd like to add an aftermarket backup camera or find out what's going on with the factory one to get it up and running. So now let's start with the T20 Torx screws up at the top. There's one. There's two. And then all you have to do is grab this dash panel from the top and give it a very subtle but tight tug. And just like that, the dash panel is out. And in this particular model, the screen is attached to the main dash panel. This is the 4-inch screen. The ones with the 8-inch screen would be attached to the sub dash behind this main panel. Let's continue disassembling this dash. You're going to have 3 sections of plugs. You're going to have the top piece, which is a power outlet. There's a plug behind that. The main radio plugs, the main power plug, the antenna connection, the USB plug, factory backup camera, and the GPS antenna, as well as the AM and FM antenna. You're also going to have the area down here with the climate controls and the switches all the way down here. So let's start at the top. Now we can take this entire panel over to our table and start removing the screws that I previously mentioned to you. But before we move on, let's identify some of the factory harnesses that are behind the radio. This bundle here contains everything that was plugged in to the factory radio, including this blue plug. This is the factory GPS antenna. Right over here, you're going to have your main power plug. This is what has your power, speakers, and data connections. You also have your AM/FM antenna, which is this white plug. The factory USB runs off of this gray connector. And what's going to happen to the factory USBs is they're still going to stay functional, but they're going to only serve a charging purpose. And this red plug here happens to be your digital factory backup camera. As you guys know, this particular truck doesn't have a functioning backup camera, but we're still going to plug it in so that you can understand what to do with it. Now, another common practice to have is make sure that you address your GPS antenna, your Wi-Fi antenna, and your microphone. I've already mounted the GPS antenna. Wi-Fi antenna is here. GPS antenna is perfectly fine there. As long as it's not directly below any hard steel or concrete, GPS signal will flow through, no problem. The Wi-Fi connection is between the radio and your phone if you're gonna give your radio Wi-Fi hotspot from your phone. So down here, it's perfectly fine. Now make sure that you address the excess wiring and leave yourself enough slack to come out, because you're gonna wanna hold the radio here and you're gonna wanna make your connections. So don't leave your antenna connections too short. Otherwise, you're gonna find yourself buried in the dash trying to make those connections. There's plenty of room inside of this radio cavity for all the excess wires to tuck back in, but just make sure that you do those things. Just very good common practices to do that, as well as addressing your microphone. The microphone is already mounted at the A pillar, so that's perfectly fine. Another good common practice to have is make sure that you use either an alcohol wipe or a Clorox wipe just to remove all of the excess dirt from the area where you're going to be mounting your antennas. After you wipe it down with an alcohol wipe or a Clorox wipe, go ahead and use a dry paper towel to clean the surface. That's going to make for a better adhesive when you put your antennas on those surfaces. So some additional steps to take just to prepare the harnessing to connect it to the factory radio connections is you want to make sure that you identify all the connectors that are on the main harness. As you could tell, there's one harness labeled audio output, and there are 2 harnesses labeled audio input. This has to do whether you have a factory amplified or a non-factory amplified system. This happens to be a non-factory amplified system, so we're going to connect to the one that's labeled without factory amplifier. Now, another thing you're going to notice is there's a few loose wires that are coming off of the main connector. Since this handles your steering wheel controls, your backup camera through CAN bus and not necessarily through an analog trigger, you're going to want to tape up and make sure that you don't short the connections that you're not using. But you also want to make sure that you address them. Don't leave them hanging, don't leave them loose. Um, on this harness, you also have audio input connections for a factory CD player and a factory auxiliary audio input. You cannot maintain both, you can only maintain one or the other. There is an auxiliary audio input harness that is included in the kit. That's where either one of these two audio connections will connect. This is the main plug to the radio. And then you're going to also see there is a plug here that says to hazard lamp on the radio. You're going to see where that plug goes. There's also a plug that goes to the backup camera retention module. This is going to plug in here, and the red plug that is connected that was connected to the factory radio is going to connect there, and this is what converts the video signal from digital to the composite RCA type connection to connect into the Linkswell radio. You're also going to have a CAN bus connector. You'll notice that some of these CAN bus modules have two connections on them. You're only going to use one, not both. Here is another connection labeled multi-camera interface. We at Linkswell make a multi-camera interface module which allows you to connect up to 7 cameras to this radio. From factory, you have 3 different inputs. One last thing is this plug labeled to climate, and this is a simple single plug that's got a label that reads to climate, and that's going to connect to the AC plug that we disconnected from the factory bezel. So here we have our microphone harness, which is the off-white type of plug. It's labeled audio out. This is the one that houses your front, rear, and subwoofer outputs. The microphone plug is also there. Remember, since we're not adding aftermarket amplifiers into this truck, we're going to tape off all of our unused RCA connections. And then you also have the white connector, which is going to have a USB input on the other end so that you can plug in a thumb drive or a hard drive into the radio. The one with the red plug has 2 cables coming off of it. One of them is going to go to the factory USB cable so that your USBs can continue to provide charging. The other one is a standard USB connector with a label on it that reads phone link. Remember, you could do wired or wireless Android Auto and CarPlay through this head unit. So this is what it should look like once it's all plugged in. The only connections that are left is our reverse AHD backup camera signal. There's 2 outputs on this black box, which is the backup camera interface module. We're not going to be using the CVBS. We're going to be using the AHD connection. Make sure that any plug that you don't use, whether it's a wire or RCA connection, tape the tips just so that they don't have potential to create additional problems in the future. Same thing with the factory CD player or the factory auxiliary audio RCA connections. This particular truck doesn't have either one, so all 4 are getting taped up. The only connections that are left are the multi-camera interface plug, which we're not going to be using in this truck, the one labeled to the hazard lamp that's going to go to the radio, the main radio plug, which is right over here, as well as the CAN bus module. Just want to mention this. Earlier I said some CAN bus modules utilize both plugs. In this particular truck, you're only going to be using one. And then the only things that are left after that is our AM/FM antenna and the factory USB ports. Next, we have our reverse camera input harness. In this case, we would only be using the backup camera, and that's the one that's labeled factory cam input. The other 2, the side camera and the front camera inputs, we're not going to be using. So we're going to tape those up, as well as the additional wires that come in here. These are independent power connections to your 3 cameras. If you choose to run a front camera, this can provide a power connection to that camera, a side camera as well. But since we're not going to be using them, we're going to go ahead and tape them off. The factory cam input is going to connect to the AHD camera output of our module that we previously talked about. The other one that's not used, the CVBS output of this module, we're just going to tape up and not use. So we're also going to tape up this connection to make sure that it doesn't disconnect. Once we start tucking all of the harnesses in place, it's going to go ahead and tape this connection and secure it this way. And so here we have your AM/FM antenna adapter, which is going to plug into this white connector. It's the one with the thicker cable, and that's basically going to plug in there. And now you have your standard Motorola type antenna connection. And then last but not least, we have our Toslink fiber optic audio output cable and our DVR cable. This provides power to our HDMI input interface module. It can also provide you with constant power, ground, and ignition outputs. The amperage on this plug is very limited, so if you plan on running something that is of high amperage rating, we suggest that you use a relay circuit to be able to do that. In this case, we're not going to use them, but we're not going to leave them out. You want to make sure that you leave them in there. And one really good common practice is to put all of your small plugs that are going to go into that grid together, so that when you go plug them in, everything as far as your connections goes, you have your smaller plugs, you have your antennas separately, and then you have your main radio plug ready to go. And then ultimately, you're going to have the bottom connectors all separate from everything else that's going on behind the radio. Now let's talk about assembling your dash, transferring the Linkswell Gen 5S unit onto your dash panel. You're going to notice some notes on the back of the Linkswell radio. It'll tell you that if you have the 4 or 5 inch screen from factory, that you need to cut out a couple of the mounting poles that are on the plastic trim. Now, if you have the factory 8.4 inch screen, then there's going to be a different type of mounting pole that you're going to need to cut. What I would recommend is that you go ahead and try it without cutting any of these poles. And the worst thing you're going to notice is maybe a gap on the edge. If you notice that gap, go ahead and take your screws out and cut it out. But I'm going to try it without cutting the poles. So using a T15 and that number 7 socket we talked about, we're going to disassemble the back part of this panel so that we could make the opening to transfer the new radio onto its place. After taking off those 4 number 7 screws, we can pull the factory screen out of the place. Now we're going to switch over to our T15 and start removing these screws. Make sure you save them and you know where they are, because you're going to need them to mount the new radio onto its place. And just like that, we have our opening for our new radio, and the factory panel is completely out. Now let me go gather all my screws that fell off the table to make sure I have them ready to go to mount the new radio in place. All right, so I have all 10 of my screws back. What you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna start by inserting this thing up here. This metal piece is gonna slide underneath this piece just like this. And you're just gonna drop it in place. And you're gonna look on the back side to make sure that that metal piece, that metal plate at the top, lines up with the 2 screws at the top. And so this would be a perfect example as to why it is recommended that you cut poles 1 and 2, which is 1 here, 2 here. And so instead of cutting them, I'm going to go ahead and just grind them off. So there's my first one. And there's my second one. There's a little piece of plastic left that's keeping that unit from dropping all the way down. Let me get rid of that. Okay, and now we have both sides all the way in, and all I have to do now is add my 10 screws back. I'm going to start with the 2 on the top. And I'm going to work my way down. and across. And these are the two that are not going to get used from the two poles we ended up cutting. But now, here you have your left side, your bottom, right side, and the top. Now let's take it in the car. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up holding the unit in the palm of my hand like this with my right hand, and with my left hand I'm going to be making my connections, starting at the bottom with the switches that are down here. Next is going to be my hazard button on the radio, and then I'm going to turn sideways and I'm going to make all my smaller connections, and then the main power plug on the radio, as well as my antenna connections. And then last, I'm going to put it in place, make sure it's all working, and then finally I'm going to slide it back out and connect my power plug back in. Let's get to it. This is why you want to make sure you have all your small plugs in one bundle so that you don't miss them, including your backup camera plug. So it's the off-white first. It's the white one next. Here's my Wi-Fi connection. Here's my GPS. And here's my AM and FM antenna. forget my hazards plug. That button seems to already be pressed. Turn them off. Tuck my harnesses back in place. And just temporarily put the radio there. Snapped a couple of pins down here just to hold that in place for me. Everything else is still loose. My power plug is still disconnected. Let's fire it right up. All right, and so now that the unit is completely booted up, one of the things that I wanted to show you was notice how the factory climate controls had single temperature with 7 speed. This happens to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is going to be Dodge Ram Mid. Let's find out what it's set to. So we're going to go to settings. We're going to go to system. We are going to go to system. We're going to go to setting guide. Inside setting guide, we have car model and AC. And as you could see, it's already set up to show us Dodge Ram Mid. So it's already set for us. So since it's already set, it should already be working. So all I'm going to do is go to the home screen, find my climate page, press the button so that it maximizes, and I should be able to hit fan up. And there it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 speeds, and then back down to 0. And there's my climate controls. When setting your climate, you want to go to settings. You then want to go to system, setting guide, car model and AC. And earlier I mentioned to you that it was already set to Dodge Ram Mid. But let's just say it wasn't set to Dodge Ram Mid and my climate controls weren't working. I would follow the same steps to come here, select Dodge Ram Mid, and it'll take me to this page. I'm going to make sure that under car info, I'm set to 2019. And if I'm not, I'm going to drop down the menu and I'm going to select 2019. Select 2019, press OK. The system's going to take me back one page. I'm going to hit the back arrow one time. This is where I'm going to enable my heated seats, cool seats, and steering wheel. If this vehicle was equipped with that, I would then come in here and select my save and reboot. Once I do that, the unit's going to turn off and turn back on and save those settings. Because I made sure that the right climate controls were set, I enabled my heated seats, cooled seats, and steering wheel because my truck is equipped with, if this one was. You save those functions by pressing save and reboot. The unit turns off, turns back on to save those settings. Now it comes back and your functions as well as your heated seats should work. So that's the correct procedure to setting your climate controls as well as the other features and functions that your vehicle's factory equipped with. So this unit has now been installed. The power plug got plugged in. All of our clips are basically pushed in. The only thing that's not put back in place yet is the 2 T20 Torx screws at the top. But besides that, this unit is already running. One thing that I didn't mention to you while we were going over the features and functions on the table is everything that the factory radio had the ability to control gets transferred over. Every single one of the Gen 5S radios is gonna have an app labeled vehicle. In here, you will notice that it opens up this MP3 type player. You're gonna press the gear and it's gonna open up everything that the factory radio had the ability to control. Notice that the factory panel has a hazards button and it also has a traction control on and off function. Well, you're gonna find that feature, the traction control on and off, is gonna be in the safety and driving assistance. All the way down here, you're gonna see something that says traction control button. It is on right now. If you turn it off, in the instrument cluster, you will see something that says traction control off. Matter of fact, let me show you what that looks like. So there's the instrument cluster. When I turn the traction control button on, you'd see that it says traction control on. When I turn it off, you're going to see that it says traction control off. And that's where you're going to find all of the factory radio functions that had the ability to control vehicle settings. So this is what I mean with Linkswell. Not only develops the hardware, the dash bezel, the panel, it is also the software development company that makes sure that all of the factory radio control functions are still built into the Neo head unit. And of course, the hazards button is down here. You can see the red triangle. If you push it, your hazards are on. If you push it again, your hazards are off. So other things that are recommended that you should do right after the installation is make sure that your time and date are set correctly. Go to settings, select time. Make sure that you turn off DST, turn off GPS sync, hit time and time zone. Go in and manually set your time. It is now 10:55 p.m. here in California, and it is also February 8, 2024. So just make sure you do those things right after the installation is done. And so the installation process for the Gen 5S and the 6 is basically exactly the same thing, with the only difference is that you're also running 2 additional antenna for your LTE cellular network connection. And you're also going to be loading a SIM card if you happen to want to add a data plan to your already cellular phone service provider. Now, the XL is also very similar, with the only difference is that you're not going to be using this factory panel. The XL is a 15.6-inch vertical screen that is pushed in a little deeper than this one. So because it cuts into the factory panel, you can't utilize this particular panel. You're taking the vents off of this panel and you're taking the switches down here and you're going to be inserting those into the new bezel. Everything else about the XL, the Gen 6, is exactly the same as this 5S. Let's put our T20 Torx screws back in, put our plastic rubber piece back in place, and call this installation done. Guys, thank you so much for sticking around and watching all of this information. Hopefully it's very helpful. If you have any questions, don't forget that Linkswell not only makes quality products, but there's also an entire support team behind our products. Talk to you soon. See you next time.